She slid a folded invoice across the paper plates and smiled. The birthday song thinned in the air. I heard, "You're not family." I didn't argue. I opened the proof she thought would shut me up. If quiet, document-based justice speaks to you, subscribe and stay. I'm Elena Brooks, 49, in Cleveland. One bus ride from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The room smelled like frosting and candles that wouldn't die on the first breath. Plastic forks, scraped plates, a thin squeal that set my teeth on edge. My son's friends crowded the kitchen island, laughing too loudly, knocking cups into a sticky ring of punch. I kept my smile steady, the invoice edge pressed against my palm like a small blade that knew where to cut. Maya didn't move her hand away until I looked at her. Her nails were salon clean, pale pink, a color that always reads polite. The paper was warm from her fingers. I could see the crease lines, the neat fold, like a letter you practice. Because you care about the message. I cared about the message. I slid my thumb under the corner, feeling the grain, and opened it. Quick Key Mobile Locksmith, LLC. Schlager Smart Deadbolt. Total, $289. Invoice hashtag 11872. Beneath that, a rectangle of authorization. My name typed in bold. Then a hard, fat signature that should have been mine. I stared at the loop on the E. I don't loop my E. The date sat in the wrong format, month before day, a small tell anyone could miss if they weren't looking for truth. The cake knife clinked against the tray. Someone called for a toast. My son lifted his plastic cup and grinned, cheeks red from attention. I wanted to memorize only that. His grin, the frosting smudge on his knuckle, his eyes finding me for a beat that felt like childhood trying to return. Then Maya's voice, soft and clean as her nails. "Since you don't cover the front door anymore." I folded the invoice once, twice, a measured thing, and put it back on the table. The fold made a neat hinge. It could swing either way. The room hummed over the music. Not loud, just layered. Fridge motor, baseboard heat ticking, a cousin telling a joke, someone's phone buzzing on the counter. I watched the hinge and chose silence. Saturday evening, the only time detail that matters. I held the cup and let the punch sweeten my mouth until I could swallow the heat rising in my chest. Not family. It sat there, a weight with no corners to grip. The word didn't bruise. It outlined. My son moved toward the cake, knife steady, and I clapped on the beat like I had rhythm. The knife sank, frosting gave, candles collapsed into their own smoke. Everyone cheered. I folded the hinge again. The drive home meant quiet roads and the kind of orange streetlights that make the city look honest. The dashboard glow softened my hands, every line showing up like a map I should have read years ago. The invoice rested on the passenger seat, buckled under my purse like a child you keep safe because you finally understand how. The air through the cracked window smelled like cold rubber and river water. The curve of the highway took me along the lake and, for a moment, Cleveland felt like a record I hadn't flipped in a while, waiting, tracks unplayed. I had given Maya a spare key after a surgery when stairs felt like mountains. I had told her, it's temporary, and meant it the way people mean, we'll talk later. Later becomes a hallway you never walk down. She liked to coordinate her word, charming to anyone who doesn't live with it, bills on autopay, packages signed for, vendors that need access ASAP. My spine learned the shape of yes. The invoice lay there like a confession, written in someone else's hand. I stopped at a red light and read the bottom line again. Paid. A small satisfaction there. She had paid to prove a point. The point would cost her more than money. The light turned green, and the car behind me blinked its patience twice. I moved. When I first bought the house, the windows rattled in storms. I learned to press paper towels into the frames, to listen for leaks like you listen for the wrong kind of quiet in a child's room. I worked mornings at the clinic, answered phones for people whose pain taught me how to speak softly even when I wanted to hurry them. The house wanted the same care. It didn't ask to be guarded with a deadbolt I didn't choose. At home, I cut the tape on a manila folder and wrote, in sharp block letters, House Access. The marker smell filled the kitchen. I slid the invoice inside between an old appliance warranty and a faded spare key label I should have taken back years ago. The folder made a flat sound when it met the drawer. Paper, wood, a small thud. The sound of a line being drawn where no one can pretend they didn't see it. Sleep came in pieces. I kept seeing the loop on that forged E, fat and wrong, like a mouth making the wrong apology. In the morning, I made coffee and didn't drink it. I read through the utilities portal, every auto pay date, every confirmation code. I printed the last 6 months. The printer coughed thin paper with blue lines and black sums that told a story better than my voice could. My voice had been used for soothing. The paper wasn't here to soothe. I thought of my son's face as the candle smoke curled. He hadn't seen the invoice. Maya planned it that way. She wanted the power of a private stage in a public room, the way a whisper can cut louder than a shout. The line, "You're not family," wasn't about blood. It was about permission. She was revoking something she never issued. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that lets you hear your own shoes on the floor. I took the spare key from the hook by the door and held it to the morning light. The grooves looked like a small city map. You could get lost inside a shape if you stared long enough. I put the key in the folder. I wrote down the vendor's address from the invoice. I wrote down the phone number. I wrote down my own name, slowly, twice, the way a child practices to become real. I dialed the vendor. The line clicked, rang, clicked. A cheerful, recorded voice told me business hours and how much they care. Music filled the gaps. I didn't leave a message. Not yet. I wanted to speak to a person, not a machine that collects heat and sends it nowhere. I hung up and wrote one more line. Call county recorder. Trust packet. The words looked strange in my handwriting, like they belonged to someone who had started making different choices. The windshield needed wiping. The weather had left a skin of salt that made the world look tired. I took the car to the wash and watched the blue ribbon slap the glass. The water roared, white and mindless, and I counted my breaths. In, out, in again. A child in the next bay laughed when the rinse hit their window. I let the laugh pass through me. When the dryer arms moved in their slow, theatrical way, I thought about doors and who gets to name what is safe. Back home, I opened the folder and set the invoice next to a blank sheet. I copied the header line by line. I wrote what I saw like it might vanish if I looked away. I circled the signature box. Not my hand, not my E. I drew my E the way I draw it, clean, no loop. You need a baseline before you can catch the lie. Neighbors will tell you they don't notice. They notice everything. Mrs. Lawson across the street saw the locksmith van last week. She told me about the cheerful tech with the tattoo that looked like a compass. She thought I had called them. I told her I hadn't. Her mouth made a small O, then closed around the comfort of gossip. But she remembered the company name before I even showed her the invoice. Memory is a kind of camera. You build a case with lenses you didn't know you owned. On my kitchen table, the sunlight made a diagonal like a ruler had been laid across my life. Dust floated in it, silver as fish. I held the invoice up and watched the dust pass behind the paper, slow, drifting, indifferent to signatures. I felt my anger turn from flame to filament. It would burn longer this way. It would light only what I needed to see. Maya likes to say she keeps things efficient. Efficiency looks good on a calendar. It looks terrible on a boundary. She had started answering my door when deliveries came. She had started telling me which painter to use, which filter to buy, which day worked best for access. I had told myself she was helping. I had told myself I was tired. Both things can be true while still being wrong. When my son called to thank me for the sweater I picked up on my lunch break, his voice was bright. He asked if I got home safe. I told him yes. I did not mention the invoice. I did not mention the phrase that would bruise him worse than it bruised me. We talked about his work project and the neighbor's dog, and how the river walkway looks in early light. We left the important thing untouched, because sometimes the best way to protect someone is to let them keep a good day. I walked the hallway and touched the frames, all the faces I chose to keep, my mother's smile from a summer fair, my children leaning into each other in shirts that didn't match. The corner of a ticket stub from the first concert I ever saved money for, years before I ever walked past the museum that gave the city its loudest brag. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, A single, one-time mention, and the story moves on. I picked up a pen and wrote one more thing, HOA, check rules lock changes. I knew the number was on an old email thread about mailbox paint, the kind of thread people ignore until the fee hits. I found it. I read the rules. I smiled without showing my teeth. Words like unauthorized and non-compliant act like doors if you let them. They open and close with no sentiment at all. Night arrived early, a soft gray that made the lamp pool feel warm. I made soup and ate half of it more out of obedience than hunger. I washed the bowl, I dried it. I placed it upside down, a small, quiet thing. I took the folder to the bedroom and slid it under the bed in the flat space where lost socks live. Nothing is lost if you name where it is. I sat on the edge and let my heels touch the cool floor. The invoice sat under me like a held breath. I remembered the day Maya was born, the way the nurse said her lungs were perfect. I remembered the first time she copied my signature to Play Bank, looping the E with a flourish because it looked fancy. I had laughed and told her it was beautiful. You don't know which laugh grows teeth later. You don't know which game becomes a map. In the quiet, I practiced saying one sentence out loud, not because I needed volume, but because I needed shape. That is not my signature. The words were small, precise, cut to fit places where shouting would only echo. I said them once. I said them again. I imagined them landing on a table with the weight of a paper you cannot ignore. The phone lit up with a message from Maya. Did you get home? Yes. Good. Try to keep today simple. We'll handle the rest. We who? We what? Rest of what? I didn't ask. Let the silence answer what it can. The invoice had her handwriting in the margin, a neat note. Consider back door next month. Noted. I considered it too, just not the way she meant. I pictured the house inside a shape no one could see but me. A line drawn at the county office, a name assigned to the trust of the thing I love. Paper keeps better than vows if you pick the right paper. People argue with feelings, they don't argue with recorded receipts. I slept, then woke to the sound of a plow passing, the scrape of metal on street a harsh lullaby. I made tea. I read the HOA rules again, the parts that prevail when neighbors want to feel important. I printed them and placed them behind the invoice. The stack grew. Not tall, just dense. The weight a hand feels when it picks up consequences. You can be called not family in a room filled with your own blood and still know exactly who you are. You can drive past a museum once and never mention it again, and still understand that names on buildings are for bragging. Names on deeds are for living. The invoice didn't prove I didn't belong. It proved someone wanted me to ask permission in a house where my coffee mug has lived longer than the paint. I pressed my palm to the front door, feeling the deadbolt settle as if it were a joint after a long day. Metal remembers who turns it. So does wood. So does the person holding the key. I unlocked the door, then locked it again, slow, careful, listening to the tongue find its seat. It sounded like a promise measured out, notch by notch, to a future that would open only when I said so. By the time the sun lifted clean over the roofs, I had a short list written in plain words. Vendors to call, offices to visit, documents to request. I did not need an army. I needed a chair, a pen, and a patient face behind a counter where stamps live. Paper does not care who you are. It cares if the boxes are filled, if the signature matches, if the date sits exactly where the form says date. And when I thought of Maya's smile as she slid the invoice across the paper plates, I let my breath out slow. Humiliation cools when you give it a job. Mine had one now. It would carry the folder. It would sit in chairs. It would ask for copies. It would learn the names of the clerks. It would turn the hinge the right way. The house didn't feel heavier. It felt awake. I stood in the doorway and looked down the hall, past the frames, into the kitchen where the marker smell still faintly held. The invoice no longer felt like a shove. It felt like a handle. And when you find a handle, you don't bang on the door. You turn. You enter. You claim the quiet you built with years no one counted but you. I started with the small work, names, numbers, receipts. The folder thickened the way seasons do. Quiet, then certain. Nothing dramatic. Paper and patience can move mountains. Maya texted in her tidy way. She preferred statements to questions. Vendor will stop by again to check alignment. I read it twice. I let it sit, like a seed I didn't plant. The HOA rules, printed in thin black, felt heavier than they looked. Unauthorized lock changes require written approval. There it was, not opinion, not mood, a simple boundary in ink. I called the office and spoke clearly. My voice carried years of being useful. The manager said, "We only have one request on file." She read the name, it wasn't mine. I asked for a copy, she offered a scan. In the next email, she said, like weather moving in, "I created a binder because binders do not flinch." The tabs were plain: invoices, HOA, emails, messages, notes. Behind invoices, quick key #-11872 lived like a witness. Behind HOA, the rule sheet rested like a fence post. Behind emails, I left space for a subject line I could already hear. At the clinic, the phones rang in waves. I caught breath between calls and mentioned locks to a coworker. She said her sister was a paralegal. Trusts aren't scary, she told me, they're forms and patience. She promised a number and a list. I wrote the list in pencil. Pencil reminds you that change can be neat. Maya visited with a shopping bag and clean good intentions. She moved through my kitchen like she owned the light. She said the old deadbolt dragged and didn't meet insurance standards. She liked the word standards. It made other words kneel. I told her the door worked for me. She smiled, steady. "You deserve better." She meant you deserve my hand on your doorknob. She began forwarding emails that spoke for me. "Authorization to change front entry lock," the subject said. The body had cordial sentences and a signature block that wasn't mine. I filed the screenshot and circled the lowercase b in Brooks. My B rises at the stem, hers droops. Patterns are the sound a lie makes when it tries to sing. The first real scrape came from the bank. An autopay for utilities hit earlier than usual. Then a second small withdrawal followed behind it like a shadow. I checked the portal and saw the schedule had updated. Updated is a pretty word for moved without asking. I changed the password and wrote the date in the binder margin. Security questions can sound like a lullaby if you're tired. Maya called me mid-shift, voice arranged like a bouquet. She said the late fee would be embarrassing for everyone. There was no late fee, she said the word anyway. People repeat what works. Fear often works. I let her finish, then said I had already handled it. Silence lived for a beat on the line, clean and cold. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived with the HOA crest. It mentioned an unauthorized vendor on the street last week. It referenced concerns raised by neighbors. It asked for written clarification regarding access and locks. I copied the letter and slid the original behind the tab. Formality has a smell, dry paper, stale glue, a steady kind of air. I walked outside with a broom, only to talk without talking. Mrs. Lawson watered her winter plants as if they were listening. She mentioned the van again. She said the tech wore a bright jacket and moved with speed. She thought I had finally gotten serious about safety. I told her I was serious. I didn't say the rest. She nodded like a judge and closed her gate with a tidy click. My son sent a photo from his office break room. He held a slice of leftover cake and grinned. He asked if we could do dinner Friday. I said yes. Yes is a good word when it has walls. He did not ask about the house. He still thought houses keep themselves. The coworker's sister called during my lunch. Her voice had the steady efficiency of a stamp. Trust deed. Pour over will. Successor trustee, she listed. She said the recorder's office was kind if you were kind. She said to bring ID and patience and a pen that won't blot. I wrote the address and underlined it once. Underlines are small bridges. You cross or you don't. That night, I placed the binder on the table and breathed. I read each page like it was news I could still change. Then I added a plain white sheet at the front, timeline, dates, subject lines, names, dollar amounts. I kept the sentences short. Short sentences carry heavier loads without breaking. Maya sent a message with a bullet point list. She likes lists because lists feel like power. She suggested a backdoor upgrade and, quote, better key discipline. I read the phrase key discipline and smiled without teeth. I replied with one line, please do not schedule vendors. I attached the HOA rule like a weather report. Sometimes you forecast by showing the sky. The voicemail came from a number I didn't recognize. A pleasant voice thanked Elena for choosing Quickie. He noted satisfaction with the quote, front entry replacement. He asked to confirm the follow-up on Tuesday. His confidence was a soft fabric that wrinkles under touch. I saved the message and wrote Quickie VM on the timeline. Voices age when you keep them. The day dimmed early. The house held its breath. I took out the old key hook and wiped dust from the wood. 2 empty hooks shone like missing teeth. I left them empty. Emptiness can be a form of clarity. I placed my only key on the counter and traced its grooves. This was not nostalgia. This was inventory. When Maya arrived unannounced, she carried a plastic bin. Inside were labels, batteries, and a Smart Hub brochure. Organization is her favorite costume. She spoke faster than usual, which means she was pushing. She said, "It will all sync to your phone." She meant, "It will all route through me." I said I preferred my mechanical deadbolt. She said I was making it hard to help. She meant I was making it hard to control. She left the bin anyway, a small shrine to efficiency. I photographed each item and slid the prints under notes. People forget what they leave behind. Paper remembers. When she texted, "Use these, I'll reimburse," I answered with a single word, "No." She didn't reply. Silence can itch. Let it. The clinic's fluorescent lights buzzed like faraway bees. Calls stacked. People needed appointments. I listened, scheduled, apologized, and smoothed rough edges. Then I opened my personal email in the minute before closing. There it was. Subject, authorization to change front entry lock. It threaded from Maya to the vendor, with me, CCD. The dates of the thread told a careful story. The authorization PDF had a cropped rectangle for signature. The e-loop was too round, the date format still wrong. Metadata prints can feel like detective work with mittens. But you can still grip truth if you take your time. I replied to the chain with 7 words. Please confirm how this authorization was obtained. No accusation, only light. Vendors behave better in light. The vendor answered within an hour. He said they received an email approval. He said a, quote, family representative signed on site. He attached a scanned work order with header lines. At the bottom sat a smooth, confident name that was not mine. Confidence is often costume. Fabric tears when pulled. I printed the scan and placed it beside my own signature. 2 E's looked at me with different eyes. I felt anger arrive and choose a chair. It did not shout. It opened a notebook. Costs showed up in quiet ways. My sleep shortened by an hour. I added extra creamer to cover a bitter taste. I cut back on small treats because unrest eats money. These are the lines no one counts when they call it family stuff. Stability is made of tiny coins and unbroken cups. Relatives drifted in through phones and weekend visits. They said Maya was only trying to help. They said I should be grateful for young energy. They said the world is complicated and I should let her manage. They meant the world is difficult and women my age should disappear. I smiled the way you do when air is thin. Then I filed their words under a tab called Weather. Weather passes. Foundations are other things. I tried a soft approach with my son. We ate burgers and sat in a booth with a wobble. I asked if Maya had mentioned the locks. He shrugged and chewed and said she mentioned safety. He looked tired from kindness. He asked me to work it out with her. I said I would handle it. He believed me because he still remembers I always do. On Sunday, I cleared the hallway table and made a station. Binder on the left, printer in the middle, a small letter scale on the right. The scale was for me, not the mail. I wanted to feel the weight change as pages grew. Weight can be soothing when it's evidence. I called the recorder's office, and a clerk answered. Her voice had the calm that lives near stamps. She said their line was long, but their hearts were good. She said to bring a book and patient shoes. She said a trust is only scary if someone profits from your fear. I wrote her name in the margin and drew a small star. Stars are for the people who open doors with kindness. Maya tried one last angle that week. She sent a calendar invite named Home Security. She added 2 vendors and 3 tasks. Her invite put me as optional. Optional is a soft word for invisible. I declined without comment and took a slow breath. Decline can be a lullaby when you mean it. That night, the furnace clicked and the pipes answered. The house sounded like an old friend clearing her throat. I thanked her out loud for staying with me. Gratitude changes how wood feels under your feet. I pictured the front door, the new lock, the wrong signature. I pictured the old key, stubborn and honest in my palm. Honesty can be hard to turn. It still opens home. I labeled a second binder, house, ownership, deed copies, tax receipts, insurance declarations. The past arranges itself when you let it. I clipped everything with thin black jaws and closed them tight. Order is not control. Order is clarity. Clarity is the knife that cuts noise from truth. Maya sent one more message, small and sharp. Please don't make this hostile. Hostile is what people call boundaries that don't benefit them. I put the phone face down and watered the plant that refuses to die. A person learns endurance from a plant like that. Green keeps showing up when no one claps. At work, my coworker slipped me a manila envelope. Inside was a simple checklist for a living trust. Photocopies, witness lines, places for initials to rest. She had handwritten a note in the corner. You're allowed to choose peace and locks. I touched the ink like it might smudge, then laughed softly. Sometimes mercy arrives in office paper. The next morning I stood at my door and listened. No vans, no boots on the porch, no busy hands. I turned the deadbolt, slow in, slow out, like a prayer. Then I opened the binder and reviewed the timeline. The story had written itself in numbers and dates. All I had to do was read it without flinching. I could feel the plan forming, quiet as breath. Not revenge that throws plates. Not revenge that burns bridges for applause. This would be signatures and notices and a locksmith of record. This would be a trust with a name that isn't hers. This would be a dinner with packets placed at each plate. This would be my voice, even, precise, unafraid. Before I closed the binder, I added one last line. Confirm neighbor footage if available. Memory helps. Cameras forget less. I didn't need it yet. I might need it soon. The page looked complete enough to stand in court. It only needed me to keep saying small, true sentences. Small, true sentences make heavy doors open. When I turned off the lamp, the room settled. The house kept its shape around me like a hand. I slept with the window cracked, listening for nothing dramatic. The cold came and went like tide under glass. I woke ready to carry paper into rooms where stamps live. I woke ready to spend patience like money I finally earned. The invoice that tried to exile me now served. It sat in the binder like a key with teeth. Every tooth knew where to press. Every press would be calm, precise, recorded. I would not raise my voice. I would raise my standard and sign my name. And the house would answer to me as it always has, only now with proof that fit exactly in my hand. The vendor's reply sat open on my screen. A scanned work order gleamed with false confidence. The signature smiled like a mask that didn't know me. I printed it twice, one for the binder, one for courage. The paper came out warm, edges sharp as a new thought. I set my own signature beside it and let the ink dry. Mrs. Lawson waved me over from her porch. She had a memory shaped like a doorbell chime. Yes, I saw her directing the tech, she said, steady. Details poured out because details love an audience. Jacket color, clipboard angle, a van parked wrong on the curb. She mentioned her camera recording, quote, By habit, that was the word. Habit is a fence you don't notice until someone leans on it. She showed me the clip on her phone. The audio caught shoes on concrete, then a cheerful voice. Maya pointed, then signed, quick, practiced, unafraid. My throat felt cold and clean, like river water in shade. I asked if she would email the clip and a still frame. She nodded with the solemn ease of someone doing a small good. The message arrived before I reached my front steps. I called Quick Key and spoke like a ledger reads. No anger, just lines and sums. I asked who accepted the work order. On site. He said it was the daughter. He said the signature matched, quote, authorization received by email. I asked him to forward that email as an attachment. Politeness makes a better lever than fury when paper is involved. The email came, tidy as a receipt. Headers. Timestamps. IP footprints peeking through the metadata. The body used my name like a borrowed coat. The attachment wore my signature like a costume. I saved everything to a folder that finally felt like a door. Evidence doesn't raise its voice. It holds the room without trying. I dressed calm and carried calm into the city. The recorder's office breathed that particular air. Dust, toner, resolve. Lines moved slow but steady, like a hymn you already know. By Monday noon, the trust was recorded. The clerk stamped the date with a gentle thud. Her hands worked with the kindness of someone who sees whole stories. She checked names and middle initials twice, then once more for mercy. We turned the deed the way you turn a key you respect. Not dramatic, complete. Quiet power feels like a closed circuit. I named the trust after something that made sense only to me. It sat neat on the form, black on white, settled and sure. Successor trustee, my aunt, practical, allergic to drama. I initialed where the margins asked for proof of attention. My pen moved like it had been waiting for this errand all along. Outside, the street sounded like breaks and early lunch. I held the stamped receipt up to the light and watched it not change. Real things do not fear daylight, they thicken in it. Next, I wrote a letter with thin, serious sentences. This was the notice to cease and desist. It named the property, the acts, the dates, and the parties. It asked nothing, it informed. I added a trespass letter that sounded like a locked door speaking. No threat, just consequence, if. I signed both with my own E, the one that doesn't loop. I chose a locksmith of record and shook his hand. He smelled faintly of clean iron and laundry dried outdoors. He walked the door, the frame, the strike plate, the hinge. He wrote his card number on the back of the invoice copy. If anyone calls about this house, he said, they'll call me first. The sentence fit into my chest like something that belonged there. I drove home with the new key biting my palm through the bag. The road hummed. The dashboard glowed like a small, steady moon. I let the turn signal tick, patient, counting down a lane change. Change deserves a metronome when you can find one. At the clinic, I used my break to print a short petition. A narrow one. No drama, only a request for restraint. Property tampering, unauthorized lock change, probable forgery. Attached, invoice, work order, doorbell stills, HOA letter, email chain. The stack did not look angry. It looked complete. A judge's clerk accepted it with a practiced smile. She stamped the corner and slid a copy back to me. We'll notify if service is required, she said, neutral and kind. Courts speak like weather reports. They do not promise sun. They tell you where the clouds will stand. I went home and cleaned the dining table until it reflected light. Then I set 3 places. My son's spot, mine, and a chair where fax would sit. I placed a packet at each plate, stapled even, labeled plain. The house watched me work the way an old friend watches you pack. It knew this was not a performance. It knew the difference between a scene and a boundary. I invited them with a message that was short and ordinary. Dinner, reset, talk. My son answered with a thumb and a heart. Maya answered with a period and a time. Punctuation is a map if you let it be. I cooked simple food so no one could hide in taste. Rice, chicken, the kind of salad that crunches regret. I opened windows for a clean breeze and a clean mind. I set a glass of water by each packet because truth dries throats. Then I sat and let a minute pass without filling it. They arrived with separate steps. My son tried for a joke and tripped on his kindness. Maya carried a tote and the unscuffed posture of a person in charge. She scanned the table and saw the packets. Her mouth made the shape of a smirk, then decided better. She picked up a fork she did not need yet. I spoke in the tone I use for patients who fear forms. Soft, precise, the kind that leaves no room for bruises. "These are for you," I said, and slid the packets forward. My son opened his and paused on the first page. Maya did not open hers at first. She measured the corners with her eyes and waited for a mistake. There was no mistake waiting for her. Only the shape of what had happened and what would not happen again. My son read the invoice and looked up, confused and then careful. The doorbell stills waited on page 2, faint and wide. He recognized the jacket, the clipboard, the familiar stance. He read the email printout, the one that borrowed my name. He traced the signature with a thumb he didn't know was moving. He asked no questions yet. He was learning the room. Maya flipped her packet once the silence made a circle. She skimmed like people skim when they hope the words won't stick. Her pulse beat in her throat where a necklace hid. She lingered on the notice letters, then the trust receipt. She turned the page back, then forward again, as if order might save her. Order does not save anyone from consequence. It only makes it tidy. I kept my voice steady and small enough to fit the room. "That is not my signature." The words sat down in the air and refused to move. Maya's eyes flashed. She reached for a thread. "This is still my home." She tried to climb that sentence like a ladder. "It's my home," I said. "Your name is only on the invoice." No heat, no echo, just the ceiling where ladders end. The rest moved like a train that already left the station. I explained the trust in 3 clean lines. I named my aunt as successor trustee because calm survives storms. I described the locksmith of record and the meaning of record. I explained what a cease and desist letter does without raising its voice. I pointed to the copy of the HOA rule, printed in quiet authority. I mentioned the petition only once, and only to clarify scope. Every word had a job and finished it. My son turned a page and exhaled hard. He saw the work order with its strange E and dated bravado. He asked Maya if she had signed it. He kept his voice gentle because he has my hands. She answered with a shrug that tried to be small and failed. She said she acted for safety, a word that tries to erase other words. Safety is real, so is theft of consent. He closed his packet and pressed his palm against it. He looked at me as if seeing the entire year at once. He apologized with his eyes before his mouth found shape. I did not let the apology land yet. It had a place to go. I told Maya the boundaries like dates on a calendar. No vendors, no authorizations, no access without written consent. Keys returned tonight. Notifications routed to me only. Autopays under my sole control. There was no list on the table. The sentences made their own fence. She tested one slat and found it firm. Her face moved through angles, logical, offended, pleading. She mentioned insurance again, a tired horse she liked to ride. I said the policy sits in my name and stands on my choices. She mentioned helping, another workhorse used to drag lines. I said help arrives when invited and leaves when asked. I slid a small envelope toward the center. Inside lay a photocopy of the wrong signature and a blank page. I invited her to write my E beside the other one. Her hand hovered, then fell back to her lap. Silence knew what it was doing. It did not need me. We ate, because bodies insist. Chewing slowed us to a human pace. Plates clicked. Forks found edges. Chicken surrendered without fuss. The packets waited like open doors propped with books. When we finished, I asked for the keys. Maya held her tote a second longer than necessary. Then she took out the key ring with a shiny flourish that didn't land. She placed it on the table as if it might melt through. Metal ring soft and final on wood. I added the ring to my palm and felt the weight correct itself. My son asked if there was more he should know. He wanted to stand where the floor would not move. I told him there was a petition in case of further tampering. I told him I hoped it would sleep in a drawer. I told him I was not pressing criminal charges now. I told him now depends on behavior, not history. His shoulders dropped in what grown people still call a sigh. He thanked me for being clear. Clarity turns fear into something a person can carry. Maya tried the smallest door left. Shame. She asked if I was doing this to embarrass her. I said I was doing this to live in my home. She asked if I didn't trust her. I said, trust is a door you do not get to change without consent. She did not answer. Sometimes the best reply is the weight of a key. When they left, the house felt taller by an inch. I washed dishes in water that forgot to cool. I dried everything and listened to the hum behind the walls. It sounded like a patient heart finding its pace again. I imagined paper resting where it should rest. Folders closed, stamps drying, ink allowed to be still. Later, Quick Key called to confirm they understood the record. The tech's voice lost its sales polish and found something better. He offered to note my file with a special flag. He explained what that would prevent and how. I thanked him like a person thanks a stranger who found their wallet. The relief was not dramatic, it was structural. I walked the perimeter of the rooms I keep. Bedroom, hallway, kitchen with the soft light over the sink. I touched the door frame that held the height marks from childhood. A pencil once lived there as if its whole life were spent measuring joy. I had not added a mark in years. I pressed my finger to the frame and remembered reason. Before bed, I opened the binder and tucked the dinner packets inside. They were creased now, edges softened by hands and breath. I wrote a final note in small print that made sense to me. Proof takes the volume out of pain. The sentence felt like a lock, seating clean in its strike. I slept as if I had rearranged furniture in a heavy room. You wake, and your feet do not find the old bruising corner. You wake, and your hands know where the light switch is. You wake, and the door opens exactly when it should, no more, no less. In the morning, the street sounded ordinary, which felt like a gift. I poured coffee and let it steam against the window's cool pane. My phone lay face down, quiet, well-trained. The house inhaled with me and did not hold the breath too long. I patted my pocket for the keys and found only mine. I lifted the new one and felt its teeth waiting for work. There would be conversations later. There would be family explanations and apologies that arrive in parts. There would be days when memory tried to loosen the screws. But the hinges were set and the latch knew my hand. The power had already shifted. It didn't crow, it clicked. The next day opened like a window that finally slides. Cold air, clean light, a calm door. Nothing dramatic, just the right things in the right places. I packed the binder and drove to the bank. The tires hummed a steady answer under the overpass. I changed every portal that had learned my old yes. New passwords, new recovery path, new billing cycle. The teller watched my hands steady on the forms. She said I had everything I needed. I said I finally believed her. Maya texted at noon. Her sentences arrived shorter than usual. We should talk. I can explain. Explanations wash like rain. They don't change wood. I replied with the phrase that saves women time. Please send anything in writing. Paper doesn't scold. It remembers. By nightfall, the doorbell flashed a small blue pulse. I opened to find Maya standing there alone. No tote, no clipboard posture, no rehearsed smile. She held a single envelope and a face that had learned silence. Keys, she said, and placed them in my palm. Metal felt correct and ordinary, which is what I wanted. She added a folded page, her signature below a line that mattered. Acknowledgement of no access without written consent. I read it once. I nodded once. Boundaries don't need speeches, only signatures. Are you pressing charges? She asked. voice thin. Not a challenge, a fear that had learned manners. Not if it stops here, I said. Not if you stop. She looked past me into the hallway like she missed a room. That ache belongs to anyone who tries doors that don't open. I was trying to keep things efficient, she said. Efficiency is a nice word for erasing other people. I need my own life to be mine, I said. She nodded, like a student copying a sentence she never liked. We both understood the lesson cost. She left without asking to step in. I watched her walk to the car and not look back. Inside, the house exhaled the way a body does after pain. I set the keys in a bowl that used to hold lemons. They sounded like rain easing off a roof. I called the locksmith of record and confirmed the note. He read the flag like a promise kept by machines. He said their file would trigger a call to me first. That is what power sounds like when it whispers. My son came by the next day with flowers that didn't match. He stood in the doorway as if the wood might judge him. "I'm sorry," he said, everything soft and visible. Sorry is good when it comes with a plan. We sat at the table that had learned new weight. He asked where to begin helping without taking. We started with small tasks that live in daylight. We moved autopays back under my login. We set alerts that ping my phone and no one else's. We wrote a contact sheet where kindness outranks convenience. He read each line like it had a heartbeat. He thanked me for trusting him to learn. Trust is not a gift you wrap once. It's a ritual. The petition slept in a drawer like a weather kit. Prepared, hidden, boring in the best way. I checked it once and let it dream. Neighbors waved with a new kind of wave. Not gossip coy, not pity. The wave people give when a fence line is clear. Mrs. Lawson brought over lemon bars that cut sweet. She said the clip was deleted after I confirmed receipt. Mercy looks like that sometimes. Small, practical, enough. I walked the rooms and named what changed. The thermostat obeyed my hand without delay. The mailbox key lived where I put it. The alarms knew whose phone to love. I slept a full night for the first time in weeks. Sleep felt like a long road with green lights. Maya sent one last message that did not pick a fight. I'll respect your terms. No period, no exhale. I wrote back, thank you, I wish you well. Wishing well is not surrender. It is closing a door without slamming it. On Sunday, I washed the good glasses that no one sees. The sink steamed and the window fogged like a soft mask. I thought about the forged E and the girl who once looped it for fun. I let the memory stand without touching the edges. Love and boundary can share a hallway if you sweep it. I gave myself one quiet kindness, a new rug by the door. Something sturdy, not loud, meant for many entries. I placed it straight and pressed the corners flat. Welcome means something different when you choose it. The clinic week came and went like orderly tide. Patients told their hurts and took their appointments. I found my own name printed neatly in the center of my day. No more optional on other people's calendars. No more representative attached to my life. Optional is where people vanish. I am not vanishing. The trust packet arrived by mail with official calm. Seal, wait, the paper that rustles like it knows the law. I placed it in the binder behind a tab called Foundation. Foundations don't glitter, they hold. I cleaned the hallway mirror and liked the face looking back. Not triumphant, not hard, just someone who keeps her house and her hour. I practiced the sentence that started this turn. That is not my signature. I smiled at how small it is and how much it moves. Small sentences open big doors. I met my son for coffee near the river. We watched a boat push past, stubborn and sure. He said he had talked to his sister with kindness and a line. Siblings learn their own fences if you let them. He asked if birthdays would still happen at my table. I said yes, under the new weather. Weather changes, home remains. Weeks folded into ordinary. Ordinary is the prize no one advertises. I drove the late route once, road slick, wipers metronome steady. Streetlights stitched the city into a calm seam. The key in my pocket made no sound. It didn't need to. Everything it promised was already true. The house felt taller because my spine did. The silence held shape, not fear. I could hear the soft tick of the thermostat and nothing else. Clarity had quit its second job as anger. It worked only the day shift now, and the pay was steady. I thought about calling what happened revenge. It wasn't. It was repair with receipts. It was a woman choosing paper that didn't shake. It was the opposite of spectacle. It was a yes to myself spoken in clerks, offices, and kitchens. It was an E written the way my hand believes in it. It was a door that knows who turns it. When people tell you you're not family, believe them. Believe them, then check the deed. Believe them, then check the email headers. Believe them, then file the form that makes belief irrelevant. Love who you can, protect what you must. Do both without noise when you can. Night eased into a wet shine on the boulevard. The light ahead turned green and stayed, a quiet benediction. I rolled forward, engine low, hands easy at 10 and 2. And if this kind of calm, document true justice steadies you, ride with me. Tap like, share the road, and subscribe so these stories keep their lights on.